The material for today is the book of Job, which you all understand very well, so we're done. See you next week. That's all we have to do to cover this one, right?
We all have the patience of Job, so.
Well, you won't find that in this book. You may find it in the New Testament, not here. So we'll see how patient this man is anyway. All right, so I personally believe that almost every interpretation of Job I have ever heard of is wrong.
I can believe that.
Because I don't think the book is about Job.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's about Job's friends, not about Job. It certainly has Job in here, but the question of exactly what's going on here, I think, is a little bit more complicated. In fact, we might be looking for the very answers that the book of Job says don't look for. Remember when we looked at the section on laments, what two words came out? What are the two phrases? Yes, ma'am.
Why and how long?
Why and how long? Thank you very much. You can come up here, I'll give you a star in your forehead.
The Star of David?
No. Fred, you probably know about this. You went to a Catholic grade school?
Yeah.
Okay, when I went to Catholic grade school, when I came home from Lutheran grade school and saw the Catholic girls particularly going home, some of them had a star in their forehead. The nun put a star in their forehead if they had been a very good girl that day. I never saw a boy with one. So whenever I say you get a star in your forehead, that was if you were really, really good for Sister Mary, Margaret, or whichever one were there. But the question of why and how long. So you've been around with me for a few weeks now. Which stage is the book of Job?
One? Yeah. One.
Yeah.
One.
One. How can it be one?
He's in a relationship with God.
He's in a relationship with God.
It's 1 and 3.
1 and 3. Why 3?
Well, there's all the bad things that happen.
All right, all the bad things that happened to him. Like I said, the interpretation most people come up with is wrong. And so I'm telling you right now, you're wrong. If this were week 2, I would never say that, Fred. But week 43 or whatever it is, we can play around this a bit. But you're answering or asking the very deepest question that happens here. Has something bad happened to Job because he did something bad?
No.
That's stage 3. You turn away from God, and the consequences are that you are cast out of God's presence. So stage 3 is like Adam and Eve getting thrown out of the garden. All right? And so the real question, but Fred, what you're answering is the very way that Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar and Elihu all think. Now, to try and get at this, I have a variety of different introductory things that I want to do today. I look forward to some sessions more than others for new kind of insights. Today is just a wonderful one. The Psalms and today, these are really neat to try to think through. But first of all, there was an instructor that you had in this course earlier who talked about teleology and ontology. Do any of you remember those words?
Yes.
All right. Teleology is when we motivate someone by...
The law. If then, cause.
I'm looking for 2 other words.
If then.
It is with the law, but 2 different ways we can reward and punishment. Oh, got that one wrong. So either by reward or punishment. All right, ontology talks about how you live out a relationship you are already in. So can I motivate my members of the congregation appropriately, teleologically. No, appropriately. Can I appropriately motivate anyone teleologically who is a member of the congregation and confesses their faith in Christ?
No.
By reward and punishment, in other words.
No.
No. Why not?
Punishment is the only result.
Okay, Fred says all you can do is tell them about Christ. Christ who will save them if they shape up, right?
No. You already saved.
Well, no, they're already saved.
See, you really have to listen carefully when you're up against me, Fred. I make trouble for everybody. No. If I'm already saved and redeemed, you can never motivate me out of either threatening me with hell or promising me heaven. Because Christ already has taken care of that. I can describe what the life is like for someone who is at enmity with God, which is still in our nature, our sinful nature, but my motivation in that realm can only be to spoil anything that you try to do to get God to love you. Any more than I could get Kathy to marry me. It's just never gonna happen. Can anybody get their wife to marry them? They're already married. And can we get God to love us? We're already loved. Now the trouble is, many Christians expect so much from other people that if they don't see it and if they don't get it, then they think, well, we're going to have to start motivating by the law, by threat of punishment. How can you say you're a Christian and you don't come to church? How can you say you're a Christian, you don't come to Bible class? How can you say you're a Christian, you put 3 cents a week in the offering plate and begrudge that? How can you say you're a Christian if, in other words, anytime I question whether you are a Christian because I don't see the fruits I want to see, then I'm stepping outside the relationship. Now I can proclaim that our old sinful nature wants to fight against God and that our new life in Christ desires to love and serve Him. So motivation can never be more than announcing the good news of what God has done for us and has made us to be, and encouraging people to use their gifts and live within that relationship. All right? Now, when you look at Deuteronomy, and it says something like, the Lord your God is bringing you into the land that He plans to give you to possess. If you stay faithful in that relationship, then you will enjoy the benefits of it. If you turn away from that relationship, then you will lose the benefits. Is that teleological or ontological? Ontological. Because God says, I am bringing you into the land. This is the relationship I have for you. Now, you could leave it. I don't want you to leave it, but you could leave it. So if and then can be used both with teleology and ontology. With teleology, it says if you do this, then you get the goodies. Ontology says if you do this, you lose the goodies. Okay, so you're either in a relationship or out of it. If I'm in the circle, I can't get back in that triangle that we looked at a couple weeks ago. If I'm in the triangle, God says, please don't go back into the circle. Don't leave me and abandon me for other gods or other nations and treaties or trying to beat up on somebody else. So the trouble is, I know that my old sinful nature is still there. And I know it's still there in you too. So I can easily be tricked into thinking that if I want you to do something, I can threaten you with punishment. That's why most people hate the Old Testament. Because they think God is bawling them out when they read about the bad stuff that happened to somebody else, and He's going to send them to the fiery furnace if they don't shape up. And so from the very first, I tried to say, remember, there are two kinds of relation. There are people who are in the relationship, and there are people who have left it. Don't read every sentence in the Bible and say, God is saying to me that I'm in trouble with Him. There are people who have left the relationship. It is possible for us to deny the faith, but that is not where the motivation comes from. The motivation is the feeding with word and sacrament to feed us to live out that which is already there. Now, what happens if I look for that fruit and you don't produce it? Then what is my choice? Then what do I do?
Remind people of the great grace of God.
Yeah, but what happens if they still reject it and resist it and don't do the things I know they need to do?
Office of the keys,
I'm sorry, office of the keys, which means?
go with other people, go through the process.
We're not talking about people who are sinning against, just not doing enough.
Yeah. I think you should still do it.
I should go to people with the office of the keys and condemn them for not being good Christians.
Not, it's never condemning.
I had the misfortune of listening, turning on the radio this morning.
Talk loudly, please.
I had the misfortune of listening to the radio this morning, and it's a series on Pilgrim Progress,
Pilgrims, John Bunyan.
part 2, and I was introduced to a character called the Man in the Iron Cage. You know, I think he's kind of exhibit 1 in what you're talking about.
Okay.
I found him very scary. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, see, I don't have a choice. I don't have anything else. Very often when people come out of a funeral and they say, that was a really good gospel-centered funeral, my throwaway line is usually, it's the only story I've got. I don't have any other story, except to commit those who have died to the grace and mercy of God, which they were brought into and by which they lived. Now, you see, I could say, I know that it's possible for people to spurn the gospel
Once they believe.
after they have come to faith.
Yes.
Now there are some, the Baptist Creed, for example, that I read recently, would say that those who endure to the end are saved. Some may look like they're being faithful, but don't stick with it. And so they really never were really deep into it anyway. And so therefore only some are really going to be the elect and are saved forever, if I've understood that correctly. But everybody and his uncle would say, if we're into November and we're down $30,000 and we need $30,000 to pay the bills for the rest of the year, Pastor, you better let them know they better start shaping up and give some more money so the church doesn't close. Have you, now quietly, do not answer, do not lift your hand up or anything. Have you ever heard that? And have you ever said that? Because you see, that's the kind of thing when we say, I'm being a good person, Pharisee, and I see a bunch of other slough-offs around here, publicans, and if they would just start giving, then the church would make its budget. And so the standard line is, let's go talk to the delinquents and see if we can start getting them giving. You aren't going to pick the fruit if the tree's not planted, or if it's not fertilized or watered. The only news we've got is the news of Christ. And the Holy Spirit has to create and strengthen faith. And so if someone is not worshiping, I need to go over to their house, not to give them the law, but to tell them the same thing they would hear if they were upstairs. Here's what Christ has done for you. Because only the grace of God will motivate them and move their hearts to go in a different direction. They may resist it for a long, 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 long time, but I don't have any other story. Now here's the question. Was Job ever an unbeliever in the book?
I don't recall.
You ever get grumpy with God?
Yes, yeah.
And you see, for many people, God is so powerful and so mighty, if you mouth off and say one word against him, you're an unbeliever. And so you better watch what you say, because otherwise you're going to be on the wrong side of the door. We know what it's like if we, well, maybe you don't know it, if you mouth off to a cop. Probably not a good idea. Okay, though there are some people who do that regularly. I don't know how they get away with it. I was taught you be very polite when the officer comes up to you. And you do exactly what he says. But you see, if I think of God as a cop who's trying to keep me in line or arrest me if I do something wrong, then I'm going to be afraid of God like I'd be afraid of the policeman, even if I'm not doing anything wrong. If I see a police car in my rearview mirror, I glance down at my speedometer to find out, am I going above the limit or not? I know I'm the only one in the room who has ever done that, but so here we have a fellow named Job. And the question is, you see, many people are very angry when they read the Joshua, Judges, well, Deuteronomy, and then Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings. They did stuff against God and he smacked them one. As if they broke the 10 Commandments this way or that, and he was just irritated with them and said, I'm going to spank you till you're saying you're sorry and until you do something about it. Now, we have to ask, as we're reading, whether Job is of that or not. And I've tried really hard to work on the stages: 1, where God has blessed them; 2, where they turned away completely from God; 3, where the consequences come on; and 4, where for a remnant that maybe is righteous, maybe wicked, that got caught up in all the mess, that there is a future and a hope. But when we look at the book of Job, we also have to understand that there is the phrase, what you sow, you reap. Now, you look from the effect to the cause. A man named Elmer Engel in Detroit, at Mr. Weed, my high school principal's retirement party. I knew Mr. Engel from, or I'd heard about him and seen him from afar. I'd never had a conversation with him. Mr. Engel walked up to me at Mr. Weed's retirement, and he said, "You're Harvey's kid." He didn't say, "You look like a trap." He said, "You're Harvey's kid." He knew what my dad looked like as a kid because he lived next door. And you're Harvey's kid. The effect to the cause. You see the effect, you assume what the cause is. The effect right now is Job is first of all bereft of all of his worldly goods, and then he's bereft of his family except a wife who says, "Curse God and die." You see the effect, well, there must be a cause for it, right? And you see, everything that we think about is like what Gary Jabs, Professor Jabs, told me at Concordia Ann Arbor. In any chemical formula, there is always an equal sign. Make sure whatever you do to one side of the equation, you do to the other side. If you multiply it by 2, multiply both sides by 2. You divide it by 4, divide both sides by 4. You'll be able to solve the problem as long as you do the same thing on both sides. So, what you see as the effect, there must be an equal cause. So, right here in my wrist is a piece of lead pencil. Not just any piece of lead pencil. Harold Weiss's lead pencil. 7th grade. I was drinking at the drinking fountain during the afternoon recess, and Harold had just sharpened his pencil. And he was just fooling around. He's a friend of mine. But he was just fooling around, and so I take my drink, I look back up, and he goes, "Ah!" like he's going to stab me, and this is the result of it. Every other cell of my body may be changing over time. Harold's pencil is still there. This one over here I put in myself. About 3rd or 4th grade, and I tried to dig it out that day. I couldn't get it to dig out, so it's still there. But what should happen to Harold?
He got in trouble.
Huh?
Get in trouble.
What should happen to Harold?
Nothing. Nothing.
Huh?
Detention.
Ah,
Did you tattle on him?
Nothing.
no. What do you mean nothing?
Nothing should happen.
What should happen to Harold?
You should
He should have a piece of lead in him.
I should stab Harold with my pencil and get a piece of lead in his wrist. What you sow, you reap. That's the way they think. Okay? That's the way they think. So, if Harold gets me in the wrist and his house burns down that night, is it fair? Is it right? Is it balanced? No. What if I was the one that burned the house down?
You're one up on it.
I'm one up on it. I'm more than one up on. And what happens tomorrow night? Our house burns down. We still haven't dealt with the pencil lead. Now, nothing happened to Harold. I never told Mr. Rickard. It was just, you know, what happened, and it just never came out. But this, what you sow, you reap, is what's going on in their mind. So when these bad things happen to Job, his friends are saying, you must have really done some bad stuff, that this is what happened to you. Now, my dad was a chemist as well, and he took me to work from time to time just to see what was going on. And in those days, before the electronics and everything, he had a scale. And the job that he had was such that the company of American Metals Climax Molybdenum Company, they mined molybdenum in Leadville, Colorado, and molybdenum is a hardening agent in steels. So they wanted to sell their various metals to the car companies. That's why the lab was located in Detroit. So let's say GM comes over and says the crankshaft isn't working right. It's breaking on us. Well, his company then would say, well, let's see, if we put some molybdenum in there, or some cadmium, or zinc, or zirconium, or whatever, let's see if we put different amounts of different metals in there, if we can get it to do what they need done. After they had gotten done with something that they knew how much went in, but after they knew how much of each element should be in there, then they would give the samples to my dad. They'd take like 5 core samples and they would say, okay, Harvey, these are from different parts of that piece of metal that we made where we mixed it together with the steel. Now find out how much is in each of those 5 samples. If you were to take a bag of chocolate chips and pour it into the dough, do you get the same number of chips in every cookie? No. Some might have more, some might have less. Well, if you're going to sell some of your metals to GM, you better know that the metal all the way through will have those same characteristics. So in essence, my dad had to take the cake apart and had to examine and get out the amount of what he thought was supposed to be there and measure it. So you'd have to do that with a lot of hydrochloric, hydrofluoric, sulfuric acids. His ties never lasted really long, even though he was careful. After about 10 spots and dots and holes, then he'd throw that one out. But he would take then the amount of metal that he got from a sample, from let's say he got some molybdenum back out of it, and then he would take his little weights on the other side until it balanced. Okay, I'm supposed to have this much, this is how much I have. In fact, they had somebody who got fired because he got too good at it. He just wrote down numbers. And it's never equal all the way through. And my dad and his boss, Bob Maurer, had done that for years, and they knew that the guy was lying because his numbers were too good. Couldn't be that good. Couldn't be balanced out that, it's never quite that perfect. So anyway, when we look at what's happening to Job, Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar are all dealing with the framework of what you sow, you reap. When we see terrible tragedies happen to people, I wonder what they did. I wonder what I did. I wonder what God is trying to tell me, teach me. And you see, we have this notion that God lobs things down onto the earth just to knock us around, to shape us up. Job knows better. He knows he didn't do anything wrong, his friends are saying, liar, liar, pants on fire. We don't believe you, because it always has to work. What you sow, you reap. And thus, they are trying to convince him to fess up. If you say you're a sinner and you tell God you did wrong and quit denying it, then maybe you can get out of this mess. Now, there are a variety of different books and movies that are all written about things that happen to people. Do any of you, have any of you ever read Rabbi Kushner's book? Why Bad Things Happen to Good People? Huh? Long time ago, yeah. Rabbi Kushner's son had progeria, early aging. So by the time you're 10, you look like you're 100. Your body has aged as if you're 100 years old, and so you die very young. He was a rabbi. I don't know which of the parts of Judaism, Orthodox or Conservative or Reform. I just really don't know. I could guess, but I'm not sure on that. But anyway, he writes a book where he'll look at various passages in the Bible, and he'll look at various other things. He called that eclectic, where you just pick ideas from anywhere that can help you make sense of it. And the result of it is he says, I'll give you the phrases first, and then I'll tell you which one he picked. If God is God, he can't be good. If God is good, he can't be God. If God is the Almighty, he can't be good because he could have fixed things he didn't fix. If God is good, he can't be God. He can be the best good force, but then there is an evil force out there as well. Remember my circle and triangle in the bigger triangle? Where everything is finally under God, not external to him, that it is not as if good and evil exist. Well, Rabbi Kushner says good and evil powers exist. God is the best good God out there. He actually says in that book, you have to forgive God, that he can't do more. Don't be riding him because he can't do everything. Even God doesn't have that ultimate power. He's not almighty and all-loving. All right? Now that's his solution. The other solution, the other side of the thing, if God is God, he can't be good. My friend Bob Cole put me onto this, is the movie Amadeus, where the beginning of the movie we see Salieri, who is sitting with a bandage wrapped around his neck because he had tried to take his life, in despair. And a priest is sitting with him talking, and he plays a little ditty, and he says, recognize that? No. Well, I wrote that. Plays that a little ditty, no. You recognize that? Yeah, well, that was Mozart. Well, Mozart blew into Vienna from Salzburg and took the city by storm, and Salieri lost his job, according to the movie. Victor Gebauer told me once that what he actually did was he actually helped Mozart put a lot of the music down and set all down on paper for him. But Salieri, even though I'll hear some things once in a while on the radio that he has been responsible for, he certainly isn't as well known as Mozart, who died at, what, age 35 or something like that? Very, very young anyway, and has a tremendous amount of work that he produced. But he says, if God is God, he can't be good. God gave me the desire to do music, but I wasn't able to do it. So God toys with people. Now the Bible would say God is God and he is good. But then we just have to scratch our head and say, well, how does that work? The trouble is that most of us think of God teleologically when we're trying to figure out why things happen. Even 9/11, there are people who said that very morning, God is punishing our country for not cleaning up the filth in it. And God is getting back at us for being warmongers. And they filled in the detail any way they wanted to. But God is unhappy with us as a nation, and he's letting us have it. From the very get-go, before they even had time to think about it, that's what they were saying. How do you know that? Well, then they go read the Old Testament. They say, well, you go in the Old Testament and see every time somebody did something wrong, God bombed them. Maybe he used the Assyrians or the Babylonians, or the Persians or the Greeks or the Romans. Maybe sometimes he used plagues and sicknesses and things like that. One way or another, God's the one who deals out punishment for wicked people. My 9-year-old neighbor, 2 doors over, came over to me on Sunday night, and he said, "Tom, why is there so much war in the Old Testament?" And I tried to say, well, what God does is he stops wickedness. He won't let people be pounded on forever. And so a lot of the times we might say he's hurting people, but he's stopping people from hurting others who can't help themselves. And that's what God promised to his own people. I will never leave you nor forsake you. But there is a lot there, but there's also a lot, and I hope you've kind of experienced it all the way through here. We have seen good news every single week. But we see it, if we see it in light of the encouragement of being in that relationship with God, that goes all the way back to the time of Abraham. Right? And so, to me, the Old Testament is not a book of war and war, but God's mercy, even over against sinners, and he's not letting people go, but if some are pulling the others out or throwing them away, then finally he'll say, that's enough. Now, to go beyond that, you might remember way back when that I used an illustration about an airplane. And I used it to explain what? Anybody remember? This is finals week. Not to be the pilot and not
Jump up.
jump out of the plane. You shall have no other gods is jumping out of the plane. That's what Adam and Eve did. You shall not take the name or the power of the Lord your God for your own empty purposes, is going into the cockpit and killing the pilot and taking over flying the thing, and then you take everybody down. It's two sides of the same coin. It's the publican who jumps and the Pharisee who says, I've got it all in control. A lot of people never get in religion beyond going from the publican to the Pharisee. So we were talking Monday night about whether a quadriplegic is a sinner. I mean, they're certainly not doing bad stuff, are they? When you're a quadriplegic, it's pretty hard. But if you have the arrogance of saying, I'm doing just fine, I'm better than everybody else, that's the other side of the coin. And so what's happening here is that we've got, maybe in Job's case, and I don't think so, but maybe people could accuse him of being a Pharisee. He's not saying he's not a sinner. He's just saying he didn't do so much wrong that all of this happened. And his friends are saying, you must have, because that teeter-totter is working all the time. So this says not always. Not always. And if you want the biggest and best case of that, go look at Good Friday and figure out why all that bad stuff happens to Jesus. Obviously, he was a bad man, and they were getting rid of him. Yes, Alita? Obviously not, by the way, just so.
Isn't it appropriate, though, such as in Job's case, that we do have a knowledge, or we believe we have not done something so heinous that would cause all this
Bad stuff.
turmoil, and to ask, and to say that to God without being considered a Pharisee?
And that's my point.
Mm-hmm.
To be a Pharisee would say, I've done nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Job is simply saying, I haven't done this much wrong.
Yeah.
And I certainly can't come up with that I've done all of these things. And a lot of times when something bad happens in someone's life, then they get a little religion for a while.
Yeah.
And they go back to church for a while. That usually passes,
Yeah.
unless something interrupts it. And sometimes something can interrupt it, but a lot of times, as soon as they think God's done spanking them a little bit and getting them back in line, then they'll go back to what they did before. Which is why if I preach God's punishment on somebody, that's not going to last. So yelling at them, that's not going to last. Either they like it and say, well, that's what God wants, is to really get me feeling like I'm a worm, or I'm sick and tired of hearing it, I'm not going back. And a lot of people just quit going to church for the correct reason. They're not there to get yelled at. They're there to hear the good news, to recognize their need for it. But if I send you home to try and be a better Christian, I haven't told you any good news. I can go home to encourage you, or I can send you home to encourage you on some things where you'll continue to hear the good news and be calm and settled. But if I send you home just to try and do some more for Jesus so he doesn't whack you another good one, then I'm representing Satan and evil. So, with that little bit of 40-minute intro, I'll tell you this very clearly. If I don't give you that, this isn't going to make any sense. Okay? Now we can look at some texts. Now we can see what's going on with it. At least I hope we can. All right, so first of all, this is the overview slide, the cause and effect, the tragedy. Job says, why me and what wrong did I do? His friends say, confess your sin, God is uninterested. Bildad pretty much says, God's busy about important stuff. You think he's worried about you, you piddly little guy? So he says, come on, get off it. And Job says, God is in the wrong. He's done something that's inconsistent with his...
Character.
No.
Behavior?
No. Huh?
Behavior?
No.
Nature?
No. We don't know his nature, necessarily. Inconsistent with his promises. He promised to take care of us. Inconsistent with his promises. I'll be with you. All right? Now, what I'm going to advocate is that Job is thinking ontologically, and the tempter is thinking teleologically, and his friends are thinking teleologically. All right? And teleology is the way the world runs. You do your work, you get your paycheck. And so that happens with everything in our world. You don't do your work, then you don't get your pay. And so that is so ingrained in us because our old sinful nature has to be motivated by reward and punishment on this earth. That's why we find out what's the penalty for drinking and driving 20 miles over the speed limit. And if you don't know what it is, do it and the cop will explain it to you. Okay? He'll help you know what that is. But God is going to say, in essence, I happen to be God and I happen to be the creator. So Job, at first, is backing from the back of the plane to the front of the plane as his friends say, you jumped, you jumped, you jumped, you jumped. He falls in the cockpit and God says, you want to fly this thing? He says, no, sir. I'll go back to my place. But I was hurting so bad and they were accusing me so much. And we're going to see at the very end that Job has to pray for his three friends. That God won't zap them for speaking about him when they didn't know what they were talking about. The best they're going to do is when they sit quietly and cry with him for the first week. After that, when they open their mouth to try to explain God, then they're in trouble. And so most of the book of Job is the listing of all of the answers that they give, which are the kind of answers you would hear in funeral homes. And a lot of people say, well, that's in the Bible, so I can share that with somebody when they're in the midst of their sorrow. You got to take it in context. It says, you see all this stuff? God wasn't pleased. They spoke out of turn. So just because they say it doesn't mean it. Just because it is in the Bible doesn't mean God would say this is true to my nature and my mercy for you. So we got to watch out, because sometimes we have to say there are things we would say about God that are not true. And this is what Christians who read the Bible all the time think, my job is to explain to people what God is doing. Martin Luther says, apart from seeing God in Christ, we can't distinguish God and Satan. They're both the enemy. We can't figure God out apart from his mercy in Christ. We can't tell what's going on and why. Now that's Luther with the hiddenness of God. Our Bible is not here to help us figure out who God is. That's why when some of you are saying against God's nature, we don't know the fullness of his nature. We only know his nature in terms of suffering and dying by sending his son for us. We don't know what is going on in the heart of God. There are people, Christians, who think that's the job. Read the Bible, see if you can poke your nose into the heavens, figure out what God is doing, and then be able to tell everybody, here's what God's doing today. Here's why he's sending you this message. Here's why he's sending you this sickness. Here's what he hopes will happen when you do this. And they will sound so good because they know their Bibles. Don't listen to them, because the scriptures do not tell us anything other than that God intends to have us with him for all eternity, and that he will never leave us nor forsake us. Beyond that, we just plain can't know. And so we hear all these things where people will say, well, we're looking at the underside of the quilt and we see all the little pieces and patches and everything, and the other side will see that it's all part of one great plan and plotting of God to make everything work out just the right way. The Lord's infuriated with the brokenness of this world. If you think we're infuriated about things like what go on in California or in Florida or in Paris or wherever else, God is infuriated as well. The thing he does is to send his Son to die and take his own wrath against all of us away, and then to work through his Spirit, one heart at a time, to settle people down. Well, there was once a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold feasts in one another's houses in turn, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the feast days had run their course, Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts, usually after a few beers or whatever. This is what Job always did. One day, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan, or the Satan, Hasatan, the adversary, also came among them. And I'm going to read it, the Satan, every time, because I think that's the way it's supposed to be, and I'll justify that in a minute. The Lord said to the Satan, where have you come from? The Satan answered the Lord, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down in it. The Lord said to the Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Thanks loads, God. There's no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns from evil. Then the Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for naught? Does he do things ontologically? No, he does them teleologically. He expects to get the goodies. So God and the adversary are playing ontology versus teleology here. Why do people do what they do? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. The Lord said to the Satan, very well, all that he has is in your power. Only do not stretch out your hand against him. So the Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now, the word Satan is the word for prosecuting attorney in Hebrew. If you look in your Bibles, it might say Hasatan. That's Ha-H-A is the abbreviated form of the word the. In Hebrew, the word the and the common noun is together as one word. We have the king, but there'd be Hamelech, not Ham-Melech or Hal-Melech, but in their pronunciation, they merged that into one word, Hamelech. And so here, it's Hasatan, the adversary, the prosecuting attorney, the Marcia Clark, okay, who's going to make the accusations. And so God says, well, you're looking around for all what's wrong. I'll bet you won't find anything wrong with Job. And he says, I can sure find something wrong with Job. He does stuff because you make him rich. You line his pockets. Who wouldn't worship you for that? If you go to church, God will bless you. And that's how people offer it. Much of the growth, not all of it, but much of the growth of the Christian church in Africa is based on missionaries promising people that God will make them rich if they come to church. And in Monrovia, Liberia, there is a church that offers you $5 US the first time you come.
Wow.
Gives you money when you walk in the door,
That's crazy.
when maybe 15 cents is bus fare. All right? And they're doing that. The evangelicals are doing that. Okay? We'll get you to come to our church. You want to be rich, don't you? Come to our church and that'll happen. One day, when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job. I'm just wanting to see whether I have here. The right sheet. A messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell on them and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. I alone have escaped to tell them. While he was still speaking, another came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 columns, made a raid on the camels, and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking in their eldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came across the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house, and fell on the young people, and they are dead. I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his face, and fell on the ground and worshipped. He said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. Now notice the first 2 chapters, and you'll see it in the end as well, are in prose. Everything else is going to be in poetry. All right, so the introduction and the conclusion at least have some strange relationship with what's going on. Well, one day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. This is what's described as the heavenly court. Okay, we would talk about it as angels, but the heavenly court, they use this phraseology, and it just says all of them, kind of like maybe the president's cabinet or something like that, people with various responsibilities. The Lord said to the Satan, where have you come from? The Satan answered the Lord, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it. The Lord said to the Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Thank you again, sir. By the way, in what chapter does Job find out about what God and the Satan are talking about?
Doesn't.
He doesn't. He is never told about this. He's never told that God says, no, go look at that guy. He's righteous, he's holy. Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still persists in his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him for no reason. Then the Satan answered the Lord, skin for skin. All that people have they will give to save their lives. Teleological. You do anything you can to save yourself. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. The Lord comes back with the same answer. The Lord said to the Satan, very well, he's in your power, only spare his life. So the Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and inflicted loathsome sores on Job from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job took a potsherd with which to scrape himself and sat among the ashes. Then his wife said to him, do you still persist in your integrity? Curse God and die. Well, if you go look at the little note at the bottom of the page, at least in my Bible, it says, bless God and die. And I believe it is what they call a Hithpael form, an intensive reflexive form, which probably won't mean anything to you. But what it really, the rabbis, I don't know what the original was, but the rabbis were afraid to put the word curse God, even in the text. So they took the word for bless in a rare form, the only time, or there's only a couple times it gets used, I think. We know from the Greek translation that it says curse God and die. Okay, so the Greek has curse God. Later, by the time it comes to the New Testament era, bless God and die is what the text reads. Somebody probably, a scribe, probably changed it because they just couldn't abide having that in there. Now, so what she's saying, tell God to go back where he came from, and then automatically you'll die. Okay? We might say today, quit taking your pills, you'll die. Quit taking your heart pill. Quit going to dialysis. Quit going to that God. You'll die sooner than later. And so what does he say? But he said to her, you speak as any foolish woman would speak. Shall we receive the good at the hand of God and not receive the bad? In all this Job did not sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all these troubles that had come upon him, they each of them set out from his home. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go in to console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. And that's the best that they did. Christians do not owe an answer to anyone about what's going wrong in the world. We owe no one an answer. We do owe a confession of faith. No matter how horrible this is, the Lord has not abandoned his creation. Even if there are people who loved him who lose their lives in tragedies, that does not mean he has abandoned us altogether. We do not know why those things happen, and only a fool will try to use the Bible to figure that out. But usually what will happen is people will say to believers stuff from stage 3 of what God says will come upon those who have rebelled against him and rejected him. Our job is to let God be God. Well, I got to help God out. Somebody might not believe it if I just say that God is still there. That's God's problem, not ours.
So
The
it's
Lord
our,
of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. And even if terrible things happen and we die or others die, we have to leave that in the hands of God and say his final word for us is to have us in his presence forever, which is what it says in the book of Revelation. When, if you die for your faith, well, you'll just get there a little sooner. Don't go get killed on purpose. Don't try to use the gift of martyrdom. You can only use it once, so save it for a special occasion. Let somebody else do you in, but don't try to get yourself killed. But let God be God. Yes, Bruce?
well, you sort of answered, but why is that we question our, that type of answers? Why do bad things happen to good people? And stuff,
We
things like
question
that.
them because
Yeah.
we have come up with our definition of what God's blessings are all about. And then we hold God to our definition. And our definition says the good that we do teleologically ought to be rewarded. And if we do good things and it's not rewarded, God somehow must be at fault. So it is two contrasting worldviews. The Old Testament and the New Testament do not think teleologically, but the world does. And so we take our broken, sinful way of looking at things in the world, where we do get our paychecks or get fired or whatever, and we impose that upon God. The Bible is God's side of the story. And the hardest thing is to listen to it and not impose our worldview on it. And that's often why people have trouble with reading the Bible, because they want to make it in their own image and likeness. We're going to know what good and evil is. You'll be like God, knowing good and evil. Well, they get to know good and evil, but not as God does. And above and beyond anything else, who would think that the Almighty God who creates the myriads of universes would become a little baby on this planet and be put to death by his own creation and use that to restore us to life everlasting? Or that there's a Father, Son, and Spirit, yet one God, or that he's true God and true man. If Jesus stood right here, right now, and we looked at him, we could not tell that his death was going to give us everlasting life. We would still have to believe that. And so we think, well, if you go to church, if you're a Christian, then things ought to go well for you. Sometimes the family that prays together still has trouble. The family that prays together stays, and we have all these nice little promises, all these nice little wisdom sayings. It doesn't mean you don't do those, but the results are not always what we look for. And there are people who carry great anguish in their life. Sometimes because we've expected something and it didn't happen. And it's by God's grace and mercy that it does. But, so anyway, here's Job.
But isn't it in the end? That's what the result is, right?
I'm sorry?
In our end, that's the result that we want. Is
Well, yeah, if we've laid it out that way,
Yes, yeah.
but then we're gonna fault God because he hasn't done what we thought he ought to. And part of the problem, preaching the law for me is not just quit doing bad stuff. It's examine the way that you look at life and look at God to see if it squares with the scriptures. And very often I've said to people, take that idea and throw it in the trash on the way out. As I would say today, take every idea that my job as a Christian is to explain why things are happening and throw those all in the trash and cry with people and hug them and leave it alone. And say, somehow in spite of all this, I know the Lord is with us. He came to suffer and die for us. He promises his life everlasting. And I don't know why this is going on. That's honest. I don't know why. To try and comb the Bible and figure out why, we're going to find all of Job's friends and their answers, and not the ones that are there. And so if I read 3 to 41 through without 42, I'm going to listen to Job's friends and say, well, that's what's in the Bible. God is teaching us about how to deal with this and that and the other thing. He says in chapter 42, pray for those guys and that I accept their sacrifice because they were mouthing off and I didn't tell them to. So God's wisdom is not ours. Lois.
I think it's hilarious that we try to explain all these, why this is happening, or, you know, all this stuff, and God himself, I think this is, how should we act? God himself tells us how to act. What does he do? He does not explain what happened. He doesn't say why it happened. He leaves that completely out, and all he does is what he says. He says creator, forgiver, and restorer. That's all we should be doing for all these people who are having problems, is reminding them that God is creator, forgiver, and restorer. And
Yeah, and not just what we should do, but what we can do.
well, yeah.
You know, that's what we're really moved by him to do. To be one who would settle people down. And when the tragedies come, not to try to explain it. When 4 kids die in a car wreck. You know, when a little boy gets caught by an alligator and drowned.
Oh,
Well, you know, the simple thing is, well, stay away from the water. But once that's happened, you know, so many people will say, well, I know it's a terrible thing that happened, but good things came from it. I don't think God needs bad things to have good things come. And so, if God uses those things to get me closer to him, then his death and resurrection isn't all there is. If he needs anything to get me closer to him, then his death and resurrection and the Holy Spirit isn't enough. And so everything has to be interpreted in light of the cross and the empty tomb. Does this idea fit with that concept? When Jesus says it is finished,
It's all been done.
it's done.
All done.
But you see, we think, well, you know, so-and-so, and so we think teleologically, well, you know, they haven't been going to church very much, maybe this will shape them up or shake them up or something like that. Cursed the day of his birth. Now here's what's going to happen. First of all, he is going to curse his birthday. Does he curse God?
No.
Close.
yeah.
God created the day he was born on. If that day hadn't been in the calendar, then he would have died. After a few chapters, he will begin to say, I need to talk to God about this. I don't like what's going on. All right? All, I would say, within stage 1. He has not turned away from God, but he struggles within the relationship. And the Bible has no fault with that at all. Because he's struggling with how are God's promises being fulfilled. Part of it is in the Old Testament, what was the promise for?
The land.
Land. In the New Testament, in the Second Covenant, the promises of life everlasting, or another 4-letter word, Eden. Okay, the restoration of the relationship. So the trouble is, we don't get the restoration until after we die. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, if for this life only We believe we are of all people to be most pitied. So he says, we're going to go through those kinds of things. Well, after this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Job said, "Let the day perish in which I was born, and the night and the night that said a man-child is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, or light shine on it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let clouds settle upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. That night let thick darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Yes, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry be heard in it. Let those curse who curse the sea, those who are skilled to rouse up Leviathan. Let the stars of the dawn be dark. Let it hope for light, but have none. May it not see the eyelids of the morning, because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb and hide my trouble from my eyes. Why did I not die at birth, come forth from the womb and expire? Why were there knees to receive me, or breasts for me to suck? Now I would be lying down in quiet, I would be asleep, then I would be at rest, with kings and counselors of the earth who rebuild ruins for themselves, or with princes who have gold, who fill their houses with silver. Or why was I not buried like a stillborn child, like an infant that never sees the light? There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary are at rest. There the prisoners are at ease together. They do not hear the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the slaves are free from their masters. Why is light given to one in misery, and life to the bitter in soul, who long for death, but it does not come, and dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave? Why is light given to one who cannot see the way, whom God has fenced in? For my sighing comes like my bread, and my groanings are poured out like water. Truly the thing that I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. Then Eliphaz, the Temanite, answered, "If one ventures a word with you, will you be offended? But who can keep from speaking? See, you have instructed many. You have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have supported those who were stumbling. You have made firm the feeble knees, but now it has come to you, and you're impatient. It touches you, and you are dismayed." Don, there's the patience of Job. At least Eliphaz says, he wasn't so patient. Is not your fear of God your confidence, and integrity of your ways your hope? Think now, who that was innocent ever perished? See, that's the scales. Who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they're consumed. The roar of the lion, the voice of the fierce lion, the teeth of the young lions are broken. The strong lion perishes for lack of prey, and the whelps of the lioness are scattered. Now a word came stealing to me. My ear received the whisper of it. Mid thoughts from visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on mortals, dread came upon me in trembling, which made all my bones shake. A spirit glided past my face, the hair of my flesh bristled. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance. A form was before my eyes, there was silence. Then I heard a voice. Can mortals be righteous before God? Can human beings be pure before their Maker? Even in his servants he puts no trust, and his angels he charges with error. How much more those who live in houses of clay? Well, a house of clay is our body. Okay, here's our house of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed like a moth. Between morning and evening they're destroyed, they perish forever without any regarding it. Their tent cord is plucked up within them, and they die devoid of wisdom. So Eliphaz continues then. Now, a call now. Is there anyone who will answer you? To which of the holy ones will you turn? Surely vexation kills the fool, and jealousy slays the simple. I've seen fools taking root, but suddenly I cursed their dwelling. Their children are far from safety. They're crushed in the gate. There is no one to deliver them. The hungry eat their harvest, and they take it even out of the thorns, and thirsty pant after their wealth. For misery does not come from the earth, nor does trouble sprout from the ground, but human beings are born to trouble, just as sparks fly upward. Very famous text. As for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause. He does great things and unsearchable, so he's trying to tell him what he ought to be doing. Marvelous things without number. He gives rain on the earth and sends waters on the fields. He sets on high those who are lowly, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. He frustrates the devices of the crafty, so that their hands achieve no success. He takes the wise in their own craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are brought to a quick end. They meet with darkness in the daytime and grope at noonday as in the night. But he saves the needy from the sword of their mouth, from the hand of the mighty. So the poor have hope, and injustice shuts its mouth. How happy is the one whom God reproves. Therefore do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. For he wounds, but he binds up, he strikes, but his hands heal. That's also in Deuteronomy toward the end of the book. He wounds and he heals. He will deliver you from 6 troubles. In 7 no harm shall touch you. In famine he will redeem you from death, and in war from the power of the sword. You shall be hidden from the scourge of the tongue, and shall not fear destruction when it comes. At destruction and famine you shall laugh, and shall not fear the wild animals of the earth, for you shall be in league with the stones of the field, and the wild animals shall be at peace with you. You shall know that your tent is safe. You shall inspect your fold and miss nothing. You shall know that your descendants will be many, and your offspring like the grass of the earth. You shall come to your own grave in a ripe old age, as a shock of grain comes up to the threshing floor in its season. See, we have searched this out. It is true. Hear and know it for yourself. So he has pretty much let him know which end is up. Then Job answered, "Oh, that my vexation were weighed, and all my calamity laid in the balances. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash. For the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Does the wild ass bray over its grass, or the ox low over its fodder? Can that which is tasteless be eaten without salt, or is there any flavor in the juice of the mallows? My appetite refuses to touch them. They are like food that is loathsome to me." There's a phrase in there that talks about the purslane, and some word that I've never heard of before. They've changed that a little bit. So something yucky. Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would grant my desire, that it would please God to crush me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. This would be my consolation. I would even exult in unrelenting pain, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. What is my strength that I should wait? And what is my end that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of stones, or is my flesh bronze? In truth, I have no help in me, and any resource is driven from me. Those who withhold kindness from a friend forsake the fear of the Almighty. Now, there are some who say that that is God himself who's being accused there. You withhold kindness from a friend. So, my companions are treacherous, like a torrent bed, like freshets that pass away, that run dark with ice, turbid with melting snow. In time of heat they disappear. When it is hot they vanish from their place. The caravans turn aside from their course. They go up into the waste and perish. The caravans of Tema look, the travelers of Sheba hope. They're disappointed because they were confident. They come there and are confounded. Such you have now become to me. You see my calamity and are afraid. Have I said, make me a gift, or from your wealth offer a bribe for me, or save me from an opponent's hand, or ransom me from the hand of oppressors? Teach me, and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have gone wrong. How forceful are honest words, but your reproof, what does it prove? Do you think that you can reprove words as if the speech of the desperate were wind? You would even cast lots over the orphan and bargain over your friend. But now be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Turn, I pray, let no wrong be done. Turn now, my vindication is at stake. Is there any wrong in my tongue? Cannot my taste discern calamity? Do not human beings have a hard service on earth, and are not their days like the days of a laborer? Like a slave who longs for the shadow, and laborers who look for their wages? So I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are apportioned to me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I rise? But the night is long, and I'm full of tossing until dawn. My flesh is clothed with worms and dirt. My skin hardens, then breaks out again. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and come to their end without hope. Remember that my life is a breath. My eyes will never again see good. The eye that beholds me will see me no more. While your eyes are upon me, I shall be gone. As the cloud fades and vanishes, so those who go down to Sheol do not come up. They return no more to their houses, nor do their places know them any more. Therefore I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or the dragon that you set a guard over me? When I say my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that I would choose strangling and death rather than this body. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. Let me alone, for my days are a breath. What are human beings that you make so much of them, that you set your mind on them, visit them every morning, test them every moment? Will you not look away from me for a while? Let me alone until I swallow my spittle. Now he's talking to God here. And switches from his friends to God. If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of humanity? Why have you made me your target? Why have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? For now I shall lie in the earth, you will seek me, but I shall not be. So he does not have an expectation of life everlasting here.
Where does he do the switch?
Somewhere within the chapter, I believe about verse, it could be the whole thing. The first part is more just musing, so it could be the whole chapter. Chapter 8, Bildad the Shuhite. How long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children sinned against him, he delivered them into the power of their transgression. See, if your kids sin, well, what did he do? Every morning after the kids would have sinned, offers a sacrifice for them. He's that righteous and holy, even to take care of other people's stuff. If you will seek God and make supplication to the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore to you your rightful place. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. For inquire now of bygone generations and consider what their ancestors have found. For we are but of yesterday, and we know nothing. For our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not teach you and tell you and utter words out of their understanding? Can papyrus grow where there's no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there's no water? While yet in flow are not cut down, they wither before any other plant. Such are the paths of all who forget God. The hope of the godless shall perish. Their confidence is gossamer, a spider's house their trust. If one leans against its house, it will not stand. If one lays hold of it, it will not endure. The wicked thrive before the sun. Their shoots spread over the garden. Their roots twine around the stone heap. They live among the rocks. If they are destroyed from their place, then it will deny them, saying, I've never seen you. See, these are their happy ways, and out of the earth still others will spring. See, God will not reject a blameless person, nor take the hand of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more. Now that's if he fesses up. Chapter 9, Job responds. Then Job answered, Indeed, I know that this is so, but how can a mortal be just before God? If one wished to contend with him, one could not answer him once in 1,000. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength, who has resisted him and succeeded. He who removes mountains and they do not know it. When he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place and its pillars tremble. Dale, that's plate tectonics for you in the earlier form of it. God's the one who causes it all, who commands the sun, and it does not rise, who seals up the stars, who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea, who made the bear and Orion? Or Orion? Orion. And the Pleiades is the way I know that.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce it, Dale? The Pleiades, okay. And the chambers of the south. Who does great things beyond understanding and marvelous things without number? Look, he passes by me and I do not see him. He moves on, but I do not perceive him. He snatches away. Who can stop him? Who will say to him, what are you doing? God will not turn back his anger. The helpers of Rahab bowed beneath him. How then can I answer him, choosing my words with him? Though I am innocent, I cannot answer him. I must appeal for mercy to my accuser. Now, who is the accuser? It is not even capital here.
His friends.
Mercy to my accuser. I think it's God. I think, see, he thinks God's the one who's finding fault with him, even though he can't figure out what he did wrong. If I summoned him and he answered me, I do not believe that he would listen to my voice, for he crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. He will not let me get my breath, but fills me with bitterness. If it is a contest of strength, he's the strong one. If it's a matter of justice, who can summon him? Though I am innocent, my own mouth would condemn me. Though I am blameless, he would prove me perverse. I am blameless. I do not know myself. I loathe my life. It is all one. Therefore I say, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When disaster brings sudden death, he mocks at the calamity of the innocent. So you see here, he says, it doesn't seem to me like that balancing out really works. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the eyes of the judges. If it is not he, who then is it? My days are swifter than a runner. They flee away. They see no good. They go by like skiffs of reed, like an eagle swooping on the prey. If I say, I will forget my complaint, I will put off my sad countenance and be of good cheer. I become afraid of all my suffering, For I know you will not hold me innocent. I shall be condemned. Why then do I labor in vain? If I wash myself with soap and cleanse my hands with lye, yet you will plunge me into filth, and my clothes will abhor me. For he is not immortal as I am, that I might answer him, that we should come to trial together. There's no umpire between us. The word for umpire, defense attorney. Okay. No umpire between us who might lay his hand on us both. If he would take his rod away from me and not let dread of him terrify me, then I would speak without fear of him. For I know I am not what I am thought to be. So I know I'm not like what you think. Chapter 10. I loathe my life. I will give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you contend against me. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands, and favor the schemes of the wicked? Do you have eyes of flesh? Do you see as humans see? Are your days like the days of mortals, or your years like human years, that you seek out my iniquity and search for my sin, although you know that I am not guilty, and there is no one to deliver out of your hand? Your hands fashioned and made me, and now you turn and destroy me? Remember that you fashioned me like clay, and will you turn me to dust again? Did you not pour me out like milk, and curdle me like cheese? You clothed me with skin and flesh, and knit me together with bones and sinews. You have granted me life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved my spirit. Yet these things you hid in your heart. I know that this was your purpose. If I sin, you watch me, and do not acquit me of my iniquity. If I'm wicked, woe to me. If I'm righteous, I cannot lift my head, for I'm filled with disgrace, and look upon my affliction. Bold as a lion, you hunt me. You repeat your exploits against me. You renew your witnesses against me, and increase your vexation toward me. You bring fresh troops against me, like Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Why did you bring me forth from the womb? Would that I had died before, and I had seen thee, and were as though I had not been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not the days of my life but few? Let me alone, that I may find a little comfort before I go, never to return to the land of gloom and deep darkness, the land of gloom and chaos, where light is like darkness. Then Zophar, the Naamathite, answered, should a multitude of words go unanswered? Should one full of talk be vindicated? Should your babble put others to silence? And when you mock, shall no one shame you? For you say, my conduct is pure, and I am clean in God's sight. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom. For wisdom is many-sided. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. That'll be worse for you, you bum. Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It's higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth, and broader than the sea. If he passes through and imprisons and assembles for judgment, who can hinder him? For he knows those who are worthless. When he sees iniquity, will he not consider it? But a stupid person will get understanding when a wild ass is born human. If you direct your heart rightly, you will stretch out your hands toward him. If iniquity is in your hand, put it far away, and do not let wickedness reside in your tents. Surely then you will lift up your face without blemish. You will be secure and will not fear. You will forget your misery, and will remember it as waters that have passed away. And your life will be brighter than the noonday. Its darkness will be like the morning. And you will have confidence because there is hope. You will be protected and take your rest in safety. You will lie down and no one will make you afraid. Many will entreat your favor. But the eyes of the wicked will fail. All way of escape will be lost to them, and their hope is to breathe their last. Then Job answered, no doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. But I have understanding as well as you. I'm not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? If I'm a laughingstock to my friends, I, who called upon God and he answered me, a just and blameless man, I am a laughingstock. Those at ease have contempt for misfortune, but it is ready for those whose feet are unstable. The tents of robbers are at peace, and those who provoke God are secure, who bring their God in their hands. So it seems like everything is backwards. Psalm 73 is the exact same thing. I thought that the wicked had everything going for them until I went into the house of the Lord, it says there. Then I realized what trouble they had. But ask the animals, and they will teach you. The birds of the air, they'll tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and they'll teach you. The fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of every human being. Does not the ear test words as the palate tastes food? Is wisdom with the aged and understanding in length of days? With God are wisdom and strength. He has counsel and understanding. If he tears down, no one can rebuild. If he shuts someone in, no one can open up. If he withholds the waters, they dry up. If he sends them out, they overwhelm the land. With him are strength and wisdom. The deceived and the deceiver are his. He leads counselors away stripped and makes fools of judges. He looses the sash of kings and binds a waistcloth on their loins. He leads priests away stripped and overthrows the mighty. He deprives of speech those who are trusted and takes away the discernment of the elders. He pours contempt on princes and looses the belt of the strong. He uncovers the deep out of darkness and brings deep darkness into light. He makes nations great, then destroys them. He enlarges nations, then leads them away. He strips understanding from the leaders of the earth and makes them wander in a pathless waste. They grope in the dark without light. He makes them stagger like a drunkard. Look, my eye has seen all this. My ear has heard and understood it. What you know, I also know. I'm not inferior to you, but I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to argue my case with God. This is the turning point. When now he says, I want to talk to him. I don't want to hear from you guys anymore. As for you, you whitewash with lies. All of you are worthless physicians. If you would only keep silent, that would be your wisdom. Hear now my reasoning and listen to the pleadings of my lips. Will you speak falsely for God and speak deceitfully for him? Will you show partiality toward him? Will you plead the case for God? Will it be well with you when he searches you out? Or can you deceive him as one person deceives another? He will surely rebuke you if in secret you show partiality. Will not his majesty terrify you, and the dread of him fall upon you? Your maxims are proverbs of ashes. Your defenses are defenses of clay. Let me have silence, and I will speak. And let come on me what may. I will take my flesh in my teeth and put my life in my hand. See, he will kill me. I have no hope. But I will defend my ways to his face. This will be my salvation, that the godless shall not come before him. Listen carefully to my words. Let my declaration be in your ears. If I have indeed prepared my case, I know that I shall be vindicated. Who is there that will contend with me? For then I would be silent and die. Only grant two things to me, then I will not hide myself from your face. Withdraw your hand far from me, and do not let dread of you terrify me. Then call, and I will answer, or let me speak, and you reply to me. How many are my iniquities and my sins? Make me know my transgression and my sin. Why do you hide your face, and count me as your enemy? Will you frighten a wind-blown leaf and pursue dried chaff? For you write bitter things against me, and make me reap the iniquities of my youth. You put my feet in the stocks and watch all my paths. You set a bound to the soles of my feet. One wastes away like a rotten thing, like a garment that is moth-eaten. A mortal, born of woman, few of days and full of trouble, comes forth like a flower and withers, flees like a shadow and does not last. You ever heard that? That's what I say at the cemetery. Man that is born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. Do you fix your eyes on such a one? Do you bring me into judgment with you? Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? No one can. Since their days are determined and the number of their months is known to you, and you have appointed the bounds that they cannot pass. Look away from them and desist, that they may enjoy like laborers their days. He's backing his way up the aisle toward the cabin of the plane, where the pilot is. Because he's really defending himself against the guys who say, you must have done wrong. So he's really inching closer and closer to God here. Come on, tell me, what's going on anyway? For there is hope for a tree if it is cut down, that it will. For there is hope for a tree if it is cut down, that it will sprout again, and that its shoots will not cease. Though its root grows old in the earth, and its stump dies in the ground, yet at the scent of water it will bud, and put forth branches like a young plant. But mortals die and are laid low. Humans expire, and where are they? As waters fail from a lake and a river wastes away and dries up, so mortals lie down and do not rise again. Until the heavens are no more, they will not awake or be roused out of their sleep. So it doesn't sound like eternity here, does it? In fact, we've not seen a word about Yahweh. We've seen only very generic things about God, right? Nothing about the land or any of that. Oh, that you would hide me in Sheol, that you would conceal me until your wrath is past, that you would appoint me a set time and remember me. If mortals die, will they live again? And all the days of my service, I would wait until my release should come. You would call and I would answer you. You would long for the work of your hands. Then you would not number my steps. You would not keep watch over my sin. My transgression would be sealed up in a bag, and you would cover over my iniquity. But the mountain falls and crumbles away, and the rock is removed from its place. The waters wear away the stones, the torrents wash away the soil of the earth. So you destroy the hope of the mortals. You prevail forever against them, and they pass away. You change their countenance and send them away. Their children come to honor, and they do not know it. They are brought low, and it goes unnoticed. They feel only the pain of their own bodies and mourn only for themselves. Then Eliphaz, the Temanite, answered. So it's his second round. The third round, Zophar doesn't get his third answer in. Eliphaz and Bildad get 3 each. Zophar only gets a couple of them. Should the wise answer with windy knowledge and fill themselves with the east wind? Should they argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which they can do no good? But you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose a tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns and you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. Are you the firstborn of the human race? Were you brought forth before the hills? Have you listened in the counsel of God? Which is exactly where the Satan, where the adversary was talking with God. You been up there? And do you limit wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? The gray-haired and the aged are on our side, those older than your father. Are the consolations of God too small for you, or the word that deals gently with you? Why does your heart carry you away? And why do your eyes flash, so that you turn your spirit against God? And let such words go out of your mouth. What are mortals that they can be clean? Or those born of women that they can be righteous? God puts no trust even in his holy ones, and the heavens are not clean in his sight. How much less one who is abominable and corrupt, one who drinks iniquity like water? I will show you. I will show you. Listen to me. What I have seen I will declare. What the sages have told, and their ancestors have not hidden. To whom alone the land was given, and no stranger passed among them. The wicked writhe in pain all their days, through all the years that are laid up for the ruthless. Terrifying sounds are in their ears. In prosperity the destroyer will come upon them. They despair of returning from the darkness, and they are destined for the sword. They wander abroad for bread, saying, where is it? They know that a day of darkness is ready at hand. Distress and anguish terrify them. They prevail against them like a king prepared for battle. Because they stretched out their hands against God and bid defiance to the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with a thick-bossed shield. Because they have covered their faces with their fat and gathered fat upon their loins, they will live in desolate cities, in houses that no one should inhabit, houses destined to become heaps of ruins. They will not be rich, and their wealth will not endure, nor will they strike root in the earth. They will not escape from darkness. The flame will dry up their shoots, and their blossoms will be swept away by the wind. So he's saying, no, the wicked, bad things will happen to them. Job is saying, wait a minute, I'm righteous, they're wicked. Looks like they're doing better than I am. Let them not trust in emptiness, deceiving themselves, for emptiness will be their recompense. It will be paid in full before their time, and their branch will not be green. They will shake off their unripe grape like the vine, and cast off their blossoms like the olive tree. For the company of the godless is barren, and fire consumes the tents of bribery. They conceive mischief and bring forth evil, and their heart prepares deceit. Then Job answered, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Have windy words no limit? Or what provokes you that you keep on talking? I also could talk as you do if you were in my place. I could join words together against you and shake my head at you. I could encourage you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips would assuage your pain. If I speak, my pain is not assuaged. If I forbear, how much of it leaves me? Surely now God has worn me out. He has made desolate all my company, and has shriveled me up, which is a witness against me. My leanness has risen up against me, and it testifies to my face. He has torn me in his wrath and hated me. He has gnashed his teeth at me. My adversary sharpens his eyes against me. They've gaped at me with their mouths. They have struck insolently on the cheek. They mass themselves together against me. God gives me up to the ungodly. That's you guys. And casts me into the hands of the wicked. That's you guys. I was at ease, and he broke me in two. He seized me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He set me up as his target. His archers surrounded me. He slashes open my kidneys and shows no mercy. He pours out my gall and on the ground. He bursts upon me again and again. He rushes at me like a warrior. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin and have laid my strength in the dust. My face is red with weeping, and deep darkness is on my eyelids, though there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. O earth, do not cover my blood. Let my outcry find no resting place. Even now, in fact, my witness is in heaven, and he that vouches for me is on high. My friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God, that he would maintain the right of a mortal with God, as one does for a neighbor. For when a few years have come, I shall go the way from which I shall not return. My spirit is broken. My days are extinct. The grave is ready for me. Surely there are mockers around me, and my eye dwells on their provocation. Lay down a pledge for me with yourself. Who is there that will give surety for me, since you have closed their minds to understanding? Therefore you will not let them triumph. Those who denounce friends for reward, the eyes of their children will fail. He has made me a byword of the peoples, and I am one before whom people spit. My eye has grown dim from grief, and all my members are like a shadow. The upright are appalled at this, and the innocent stir themselves up against the godless. Yet the righteous hold to their way, and they that have clean hands grow stronger and stronger. But you, come back now, all of you, and I shall not find a sensible person among you. My days are past, my plans are broken off, the desires of my heart. They make night into day. The light, they say, is near to the darkness. If I look for Sheol as my house, if I spread my couch in darkness, if I say to the pit, you are my father, to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? Shall we descend together into the dust? Then Bildad the Shuhite answered, how long will you hunt for words? Consider, and then we shall speak. Why are we counted as cattle? Why are we stupid in your sight? You who tear yourself in your anger. Shall the earth be forsaken because of you, or the rock be removed out of its place? Surely the light of the wicked is put out, and the flame of their fire does not shine. The light has darkened their tent, and the lamp above them is put out. Their strong steps are shortened, and their own schemes throw them down, for they are thrust into a net by their own feet. And they walk into a pitfall. A trap seizes them by the heel. A snare lays hold of them. A rope is hid for them in the ground, a trap for them in the path. Terrors frighten them on every side and chase them at their heels. Their strength is consumed by hunger. Calamity is ready for their stumbling. By disease their skin is consumed. The firstborn of death consumes their limbs. They're torn from the tent in which they trusted and are brought to the king of terrors. In their tents nothing remains. Sulfur is scattered upon their habitations. Their roots dry up beneath, and their branches wither above. Their memory perishes from the earth, and they have no name in the street. They are thrust from light into darkness and driven out of the world. They have no offspring or descendant among their people, and no survivor where they used to live. They of the west were appalled at their fate, and horror seizes those of the east. Surely such are the dwellings of the ungodly. Such is the place of those who do not know God. Now, I did all that so I could get to chapter 19. But I wanted you to hear all, I wanted you to get that sense of it. Now, we're going to take a little more time with this. Then Job answered, how long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words? These 10 times you have cast reproach upon me, and are you not ashamed to wrong me? And even if it is true that I have erred, my error remains with me. If indeed you magnify yourselves against me and make my humiliation against an argument against me, know then that God has put me in the wrong and closed his net around me. Even when I cry out violence, I'm not answered. I call aloud, but there is no justice. He has walled up my ways so that I cannot pass, and he has set darkness upon my paths. He has stripped my glory from me and taken the crown from my head. He breaks me down on every side, and I'm gone. He has uprooted my hope like a tree. He has kindled his wrath against me and counts me as his enemy. His troops come on together. They have thrown up siege works against me and encamp around my tent. He has put my family far from me, and my acquaintances are wholly estranged from me. My relatives and my close friends have failed me. The guests in my house have forgotten me. My serving girls count me as a stranger. I've become an alien to their eyes. I call to my servant, but he gives me no answer. I must myself plead with him. My breath is repulsive to my wife. I'm loathsome to my own family. Even young children despise me. When I rise, they talk against me. All my intimate friends abhor me, and those whom I loved have turned against me. My bones cling to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. Have pity on me, O you my friends, for the hand of God has touched me. Why do you, like God, pursue me, never satisfied with my flesh? Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pen and with lead they were engraved on a rock forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see on my side, and my eyes shall behold and not another. My heart faints within me. If you say, how we will persecute him, and the root of the matter is found in him, be afraid of the sword. For wrath brings the punishment of the sword, so that you may know there is a judgment. So, what's he asking for?
Leave me alone.
Huh?
Just gonna say, leave me alone?
Well, he said, leave me alone. Who is his enemy? Now this, my friends, is a confirmation answer. Okay? Remember confirmation answers. The pastor always asks the question, so the answer either is God, Jesus, the Bible, or the devil. Okay? You get one of those four. God is his enemy. God is his enemy. And he says, and the Hebrew here is really hard. Hebrew scholars have said to each other, if you know how to translate that, you're a liar. Nobody quite understands. It's really hard stuff, because it's either, the word min, either from or apart from. Either from my flesh or apart from my flesh, I will see God. Now what's a redeemer? If the Satan is the adversary, what is a redeemer? A goel. A defense attorney. The person who will seek to clear someone else's name. All right? If my brother Dale were murdered because somebody said he was a drug runner, and I believed he wasn't, if I believed he was, too bad for him. If I believed he wasn't, my job is to clear his name. All right? I'm not going to get into the details on it, but you know Roger Mudd, who used to be on TV?
Right, yeah.
The descendant of Dr. Mudd, who was accused of helping the escapees at the time of Lincoln's assassination. And they always tried to say he was innocent, others said he was guilty, or at least on the side of the rebels or whatever. But a goel is a defense attorney to clear the name of someone who is innocent. Before whom is the Redeemer to clear Job's name? Before God. So he is to come before God and say, this one's innocent. He says, let's write down, I'm innocent. And even after I die, somebody's got to come along who will someday declare, I am innocent. Right?
That's what Job's saying. Right?
That's what Job is saying. I want someone to clear my name. I don't have time to do it. I'm going to be dead. So would somebody please come along? And he said a little bit before, there's someone who can come and do that. Who's the Redeemer in the New Testament? Confirmation answer?
Jesus. Jesus.
Glad you didn't say the devil or the Bible. Boy, we got that one good. Now, obviously, God, the Father, Son, and Spirit, Jesus is true God as well. But here, Job says, I am not so guilty that what I talked about with that scale, like from my dad's work at work, that it weighs that much, that clunk, it comes down this much, and I have been put into these horrible circumstances. He says, that's not me. All of you friends of mine are saying, oh, come on, fess up, tell the truth, and then God will let you go. He says, I'm tired of talking to you guys. I don't care what you have to say. I want to talk to God. And if I die first, because that's what happens to people, then I hope somebody's around who will clear my name. And that's how the word Redeemer is used in the New Testament as well, correct?
No.
No, the Redeemer
Our
has
It
came.
can't be cleared.
Huh?
Our
Not as
name
much.
can't be cleared.
Our name can't be cleared. So what does our Redeemer do? He comes and he says to his Father, Dad, they're all guilty. Punish me.
He took our punishment.
He took our punishment. Dad, they're all guilty. Nobody deserves to be redeemed. So oddly enough, I know that my Redeemer lives is kind of used in the New Testament the very opposite of the way it's used in the Old. Because now we're all guilty. We're all on our way to death. Job says, I don't deserve to die. Well, there was nothing he had done so bad to have it hurry up like it was. And so he says, would somebody please clear my name before God, who is my enemy? And the whole New Testament says, here I am. Send me. Not Isaiah, but Jesus. The Father says to his Son, go die for them. Go die in their stead. Because otherwise they're all going to be lost forever, because there isn't anyone who's righteous. Not one. From Psalm 14 and 53. And so the New Testament picks up on the Redeemer theme, the defense attorney, and he says, they're all guilty. You know, that's all we got to work with. A bunch of guilty ones. So it's not that Job's not a sinner. It's that at this point, the sinful things of losing his entire family, etc., were not really as a result of the wicked stuff he was doing. He was not murdering people on the side. It's not like the mafia, what's the Godfather Part 1, where they're killing the brother-in-law, is it, while the baptism is going on?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have the details right, but they're committing a murder while there's a baptism going on. It's not like that. Jesus knows he is the only innocent one. Salvation says he dies in our stead. So let's go to chapter 38 now.
What do you think?
I've got 5 minutes, Kathy, so for this one, I'm going to have to ask you to hold off. There are some more fightings back and forth. Finally, it says at the end of chapter 31, the words of Job are ended. And you have this one little bit of prose introduction in 32 of a fellow named Elihu who comes along. So in chapter 20, Zophar says so. All those people are mouthing off. They're going to be losing it in the end. So in distress, they'll find out. Sooner or later, they'll be right. In chapter 21, he says, is my complaint addressed to mortals? And he goes on all the way through this with some more of the same kind of thing. And then we're going to get into chapter 32 to 37 when another fellow comes along, a guy named Elihu. And it's kind of almost inserted in there. And Elihu says, I've been sitting around listening to you guys. I'm a young fellow. I'm not one of the older ones. But by golly, I've been listening to you, and you're all a bunch of blowhards. I would think older people know something. You guys don't know anything either. So I've got to straighten you out. And at first it sounds like Elihu wants to argue that Job is innocent. And then finally he ends up saying, he's guilty, let him die. So he kind of convinces himself as well, from everything you can see, it's impossible that Job could be innocent. Then we have the Lord talks to Job. So the book ends several times. It ends after chapter 31, then it ends after chapter 37, then it's going to end with 38 to 43. I will not have time to read all of this, but I'm going to try and read some of it anyway. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Job just fell into the cockpit. He's been backing away from his friends, and he's saying, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. And so God says, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. What did he want? He wanted to talk to God. He gets to. And God says, shut up. I'm going to talk to you now. You don't get a right to answer me any question or ask me any questions. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? Or on what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy. And somebody was asking me about when angels come. Well, this is the closest you'll get to it is heavenly beings, that they were there at the creation. Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed bounds for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come and no farther, and here your proud waves shall be stopped. So, here we're really looking at the creation story, told a different way. And then it goes on and goes on all the way about a variety of things that go on. I'm not going to take time to read all of that, but where the seashore was established, in charge of the dawn, the gates of death and darkness, the expanse of the earth, the path of light. Surely you know you were born then, right? You've been to the storehouses where the snow and hail are kept. Who is it that cut the channel for the torrents of rain and brings rain on the desert for grass? Does rain have a father, or does hoarfrost have a mother? The deep freezes over, and then he talks about the Pleiades and Orion, that he's the one who set those up. Are you in charge of all the stars? Do you command the floods to rain down? Who put wisdom in your inward parts? Can you tilt the water skins to make the clouds? And can you hunt prey for the lions and the ravens? Then chapter 39, he's going to go on with some more of that about other parts of the creation, the birds and the animals and all of such things. And then chapter 40, shall a fault finder, the Lord said that Job, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? Anyone who argues with God must respond. Then Job answered the Lord, see, I am of small account. What shall I answer? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer twice, but will proceed no further. Then the Lord answered, Job, out of the whirlwind, gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you declare to me. Will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me, that you may be justified? Have you an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? Deck yourself with majesty and dignity. Clothe yourself with glory and splendor. Pour out the overflowings of your anger, and look on all who are proud and abase them. Look on all who are proud and bring them low. Tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them all in the dust together. Bind their faces in the world below. Then I will also acknowledge to you that your own hand can give you victory. So then he goes on with Behemoth and Leviathan in chapter 41, and talks about the fact that these great creatures are creatures. There's a passage that says he enjoys the great sea monsters. It's like us watching a little fish jump out of the water in the afternoon, or watching little kittens, the way that he watches the great animals. Then Job answered the Lord, chapter 42. I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear and I will speak. I will question you, and you declare to me. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. What did he want to do? See God. What did he do? See God. And he keeled over and died, right? No, he lived. Only the righteous can stand before God and live. So, after that, the Lord spoke these words to Job. The Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, my wrath is kindled against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Now therefore take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering, and my servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept his prayer, not to deal with you according to your folly. For you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has done. So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamathite went and did what the Lord had told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. Elihu kind of disappears here. That is what our Lord does. He brings us in prayer, in beseeching, in his death and resurrection, before his Father, and says, on behalf of my sacrifice, please accept them. The Lord says, okay. And that's where we are right now. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Some people say, oh, all's well that ends well. This is a comedy, not a tragedy. Unless you're the older brothers and sisters. Then there came to him all his brothers and sisters and all who had known him before. They ate bread with him in his house. They showed him sympathy, comforted him for all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. And each of them gave him a piece of money and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, and he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 donkeys, that's twice as much of each. He also had the same number of kids, 7 sons and 3 daughters. He named the first Jemima. That's where Aunt Jemima comes from. Okay? See, you learned something today. And the second, Keziah, and the third, Karen Hapuach. In all the land there were no women so beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father gave them an inheritance along with their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his children, his children's children, 4 generations, and Job died old and full of days. Amen. So, what happens here now is that he gets all of this stuff back, and by the way, I knew a man who was paralyzed in an auto accident, who was in our choir in Germany where Kathy and I went to church, and he got married, couldn't have children of his own. They adopted a little girl, named her Yemima. The first joy after the tragedy that had happened in his life. And she's got to be in her 40s now, I think, 41, 42 years old. So anyway, I hope that the overview that I gave you in the early part of this will at least give you some sense, and that as you hear what's going on, there are a lot of answers that Job's friends gave, which, or Job's so-called friends, which we hear as well, which people will use. Here's why this is going on, here's why that's going on. I know I read it faster than you would like me to, but I want you to get a sense of the sound and the voicing and all of that, just a little bit of it, of what goes on here, and that Job is the one who is cleared in the end. Now he is enraged against God, and I don't know if it's the right way to say it, but it's okay to be mad at God. It's okay to say, God, this is not how I thought things were going to go, but not to say to God, I want nothing to do with you. And a lot of people would say that he turned away from God and said, that's it. Wife told him to, he never did. And so the anguish that's there in our broken world, not all of the promises that we would think would happen in a good, righteous way from God happen to us. And we can either blame God and say he's at fault, or struggle with it, or say, I don't know why it's going on. But finally he would say, I'm watching out for you, I'm caring for you, in spite of all of those things. Don't think that I've abandoned you or forsaken you. It's a different way to look at, I know that my Redeemer lives. Here he wanted declaration of innocence. We only get that after Jesus dies and rises. But that's among my favorite hymns. But to recognize the sense in which that's there.